The challenges facing our teens today mean that more than ever, we need to be there to support them and encourage them. The Dr. STEM Show is here to provide discussions about topics that will help promote healthy relationships, self-image, and success for teens, parents, and the community. Our young people can achieve more in life than they ever dreamed possible. The Dr. STEM Show, hosted by Dr. Stem Malatini, will foster these discussions and encourage your participation.
Genocide. What is a genocide? In fact, most of you that are watching, or maybe some of you might be asking, genocide, what's the difference between a genocide and a Holocaust? Well, before we start today's show, which is a very interesting show, let me tell you what the dictionary says about the Holocaust and the genocide. Both the Holocaust and genocide are mass killings of people due to ethnic, racial, religious, and sexual reasons with a view to exterminate that whole entire group of people. Welcome to the Dr. STEM Show. Today we have a very interesting young lady, I call her. She's my mini-me, which is what I have termed her since we met. Her name is Clementine Bihiga. She was born and raised in Rwanda and was a victim of the Rwandan genocide. Welcome to the Dr. STEM Show.
Thank you so much, Dr. STEM. I'm so glad and excited to be here today. I actually just wanted to say that I want to be just like you when I grow up, so I was thrilled when you invited me to the show today, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. I just loved your confidence when we met. We met at a conference. It was a Kenyan Women's Conference last month. Loved your confidence, loved who you are. In fact, I told you when I first saw you, I thought, oh boy, here she goes. She doesn't talk to anybody, and you know, she thinks she's all that. But you know what? You taught me a lesson that I always tell people, not to judge a book by its cover. Because when you went up on stage and started telling your story about Rwanda, my mouth just dropped. And I knew the whole world needed to hear your story. So thank you for coming to the show today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we start, let me just, in general, just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are.
Right, so I was born in Rwanda in 1986. I'm one of 8 children, and I'm actually the first daughter. I have 2 older brothers, which means I'm really the firstborn, because you know, back home in our culture, when you're the first female to be born in a family, you do take care of your siblings, whether older or younger. And by the grace of God, all my siblings survived the genocide and are living here in the U.S. I have others living in Abu Dhabi, and my parents live in Africa. But we have all been here for the past 14 years until my parents decided to go back to live in Africa.
Oh, where about in Africa?
In Zambia.
Oh, they went to Zambia.
Yes, they live in Zambia.
Oh, well, my executive director would love to talk to you, Fungai Marangi, because he was born and raised in Zambia. We won't talk about him.
Oh, anyway. That's awesome. Actually, my husband lived in Zambia for 7 years, so he's all Zambian.
He's all Zambian,
yes.
Right? Oh, that's
yes.
quite interesting. Yes. You know, I know we're laughing today, but, you know, the genocide was not a laughing matter.
No, it wasn't.
What happened for those people that are out there today going, okay, Rwandan genocide, what was it? We just, you know, read that it was a mass killings of wanting to eliminate one race. But, you know, from your perspective, since you were a victim in there, what happened to explain to the world what happened, just in general?
So when the world thinks about the genocide, the Rwandan genocide, I mean, you can Google it and a lot of information will come up. Talking about the Hutus trying to kill and wipe out all the Tutsis in the country. And that's essentially what the genocide was at that time. It was a group of extremist Hutus, mainly, that were trying to exterminate the Tutsis. But during that time, it wasn't just the genocide, it was also a civil war that was going on, meaning that there was a group of troops coming from Uganda that were coming in Rwanda to take over. And during that time, they weren't really saying this is a Hutu, this is a Tutsi, this person is from this ethnicity. It was mainly their main goal was to take over the country. So anyone really at that time was a victim, whether you are a Hutu or a Tutsi or a Twa, which is the minority. They're about 2% Twas in the country. So it was very chaotic, and we had Hutus and Tutsis and Twas fleeing the country for their lives, because no matter where you are a victim.
Yeah. I know you said you've been here for 14 years. How many years did you spend at home during the whole chaotic and killings that were happening?
Actually, after the president of Rwanda was killed in 94, which is what sparked the whole genocide, 2 weeks after that, we left. 2 weeks after that, we left because, the civil war and the genocide had gotten to our town, our area, and we just couldn't stay there any longer. I believe my family thought that maybe this is going to end, so we just stayed, and we were very optimistic, but eventually we realized that wasn't going to be the case, so we just picked up whatever we could and left.
Wow. I know in Zimbabwe, where we come from, we have the city side and the countryside, and people live in the city and then go to the country, for holidays and stuff. Give me a scenario setup of what Rwanda looks like and where you guys lived.
So we lived in the city.
Okay.
But my grandparents, some of my other relatives lived in the country.
Okay.
So for holidays or, during school vacation, we would go and see our grandparents or our other relatives in the country. I think it's very similar to a lot of African cultures, actually.
Yes.
And so some of the areas in the rural areas were hit before the urban areas where we lived. But, during the time of the genocide, you just picked up and left. You didn't even think of, how is my grandmother, 20 towns away doing? It was by luck that a lot of us, after we left the country and went into Congo, we got reconnected and reunited with these families that were living, towns away. And it really did happen, as hard as, it sounds like it did happen.
Yeah. So did you lose any of the family members at all?
Yeah, during the war, after things settled and, we were in the refugee camps and we had left the country, we would hear people saying, your uncle died, your grandfather died, your neighbor died, things like that. Word of mouth would travel and get to us and say someone died.
Yeah. Not to get graphic, because I'm thinking genocide, I'm thinking mass killings, and I think of, the war, where when I was in Zimbabwe, there was a civil war, during the time that I was probably 13, 14, and I could hear the guns, you could hear
right.
And, people are being killed. What was it like in Rwanda? Was it guns? Was it knives? How did they do the mass killings?
So mostly during the genocide, it was actually machetes. It was machetes that were used to kill the predominantly Tutsis. With the civil war, when the troops came in the country, was mostly guns. So I remember actually one day it was actually during the night, I was in our compound and I could see the bullets fly into our compound and just fall on the ground because they were just shooting, they were just shooting anywhere. If a bullet caught you, well, too bad, So I saw it, it looked like fire, like red fire just coming into our compound. And at this point, I'm 8 years old and I'm just like, oh my God, what is going on? So that's the time when my family decided we gotta get out of here. Because it's not just the genocide, it's also the civil war, and we're just not safe anywhere.
Wow. Yeah, because I was thinking, I didn't know what they used, whether it was, guns or knives. So I can only imagine.
It was both, and bombs, of course, grenades. Things intensified when the troops got in the country.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes, with the Civil War. We are talking today to Clementine Bihiga, and as I said at the beginning of the show, she was born and raised in Rwanda, and she was a victim of the Rwandan genocide. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Before we went on break, we were talking about how the genocide happened in Rwanda. And as you heard Clementine describing that they were using machetes and they had guns, and she, even at 8 years old, saw some bullets flying by, and that's what we call trauma. So interesting enough, I also wanted to do this show today to be able to demystify mental health and trauma, depression, and what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. In our culture, I should say, African culture, especially or African Americans, we don't usually talk about post-traumatic stress, as it is described. And I know how we started to talk about it. A couple weeks ago, we met at African Festival in Lowell. And as I had already met you, I said to you, one thing I forgot to ask you, have you gone through experiencing post-traumatic stress, and what did you say and did after that? Because that was interesting how that, I just happened to be a mental health person, and I just thought, how do you get to be so intact? And did you experience it, and how did you deal with it is what I was wondering. Right. And what happened when I asked you?
I'm telling you, at first, I didn't even know what that meant. I remember I said, what do you mean, what's that? I remember. It was a question that I wasn't really ready to answer. And to be honest with you, when I'm doing public speaking, I get asked that. Yes. You must be stressed or, depressed, yes, or have you gone to see a shrink? Yes. So when those questions come to me, I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm doing good. Yes. I'm doing good. Yes. But then after that conversation we had, I went home and did a little bit of research. I was like, okay, I need to go and find out what this PTSD thing is, and looked up symptoms. And some of the symptoms that, were described, I thought, wow, I felt like that before, but I just didn't know what to call it, because like you said, back home, no one talks about it. Yeah, we don't talk about it. You're regarded as a crazy person. As a crazy person if you say you have PTSD. Yeah. So that's an American thing, right? And so when we get here to the US and people start saying, you should see a counselor, oh, I'm fine. No, I don't need to see one. When really, it's probably a good idea to go and talk to someone. Yes. It doesn't mean that you're crazy or that, you're seeing a crazy doctor. Sometimes talking can help. Yes. And to even, realize that it's okay. Yeah. You're not a robot. You're a human being. Yeah. And, your brain, from what I read, when you go through all this trauma, it gets affected. Yeah. And really things change. For example, the way I view life because of what I went through might not be the same way someone who has never gone through that views life, because that has touched me somewhere. Yeah.
So what happened is, I think the other good thing is, because I am a counselor, I am a therapist, I am the person that people fear the most to go and see a person. And then when I talk to people, they go, oh, I said, that's exactly how I do it in the office. We just discuss it in general. So PTSD, as it stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, it's just a term for those people that experience, trauma. And what is trauma? If you go through a war, the way that you did, seeing people being killed, seeing those bullets flying by. Some people experience domestic violence, and they're in the house whilst their parents are fighting, and they're hiding. They don't know whether whoever the abuser is coming to get them next or not. And then some people go through sexual trauma where they're actually molested or actually raped, and years later they start having nightmares, they start having flashbacks, they start experiencing seeing those bullets flying by. Or if you walked and lived in camps and everybody was nervous when the camps were opened, and then they say file up, and you have no idea whether you're being moved or not, and you're holding on to mom's clothes because then you don't know whether they're going to pull mom and dad away and then leave you alone as a child. Or all that experience is what we call post-traumatic, because now you're re-experiencing that very same trauma again. And sometimes, if I may say this, it takes for you to lose a loved one through death or illness, and all of a sudden those emotions come flooding, like, why is it that I'm now thinking about what happened to me, and yet I'm just losing a loved one right here and right now, or I just lost someone, and you're in the midst of grieving. Then all those feelings start coming again, and it comes up as depression or anxiety. So I just, I'm glad that we got to talk, because then you went ahead and wrote an article that will be available for all those that are watching. That article is available, by the way, that she wrote. I have it on my website, drstemspeaks.com. You can download that article there. It's on drstemspeaks.com. Tell us a little bit about that article that you wrote.
Well, like I said, I went and did some research, and it took me back to memory land, definitely. So I remember when I was in Kenya, and it was actually right after I had accidentally stepped in hot boiling water, and which resulted in me having a really huge burn that I've had the scar, and it's never gonna go away. It was so painful that when I went to sleep, I would wake up shivering, I would feel cold, I would be trembling, and I would have some difficulty breathing, and I'll call out for my mom and say, I think I'm going to die. And I remember that night my mom came to me and said, what's wrong? And I said, I think I'm going to die. I can't breathe. I'm scared. And I didn't really know why I was scared. It's just this physical thing that just came over me. And so, it's not like we had money. We could go and see a psychiatrist or even go to see a family care doctor. So my mom gave me a rosary and told me to go to sleep and pray. So I put on the rosary and I went to sleep, and the next day I would wake up alive, and I'm like, thank God I'm alive. But as soon as dark hit, as soon as it was time to go to sleep, I would start feeling scared, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to sleep. I don't know if I'm going to wake up. I'm going to have those panic attacks again, which is what I learned. Those were panic attacks. And then fast forward to last year, I lost a daughter. I was 27 weeks pregnant, and I lost my daughter. And all those feelings came back. They had been gone for years. I was doing just fine. And then all of a sudden, I would wake up and tell my husband, we gotta go to see the doctor. I think I'm dying. So I'll be in the emergency room at least 3 times a week, and they'll take my vital signs and they'll say, you're one of the healthiest people we know. And I'm like, but I think I'm dying. And they'll say, no, you're fine. I'll say, can you check my heart? Can you check my pulse? Make sure I'm not gonna go back in the car and die there, But it was. And then all of a sudden I'll remember the genocide, the war, the refugee camps, and everything that I went through, which is what prompted me to write that book, because everything was so vivid at that time.
You know what? Let me stop you right there, because guess what? We're going to bring you back, because this is quite interesting, so that we can talk about your book.
Awesome.
Because I know you wrote a book. So we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back to tell you more about PTSD, how you can have that diagnosed, and whether there's treatment or not. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Today we are talking to Clementine Bihiga, who is an author. She's a motivational speaker. She talks about her book, which we'll come back and talk to us about, and also talk about her life as a victim of the Rwandan genocide and civil war. She just mentioned that there was also a civil war. So she's been talking to us about what she went through, which she'll talk more in detail when she comes back to talk about her book. But before we went on break, we were talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. What is it and how people experience it? You heard her story. It's something that most people don't talk about. There's treatment for post-traumatic disorder. But let me just tell you a little bit about some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing, which is, as she mentioned, panic disorders, that you may start having panic attacks and going into the hospital with the heart palpitations, thinking that you're going to be dying when you think about a situation or a trauma that you went through. The only thing that I can say to all of the people that are listening today is, please, when the doctors say there's nothing wrong with you, you are the healthiest person, help them connect that, you know what, I went through some trauma, and I think this is, I've been afraid just like this before, and I think this is what's going on, so they can connect you to a mental health person that will be able to help you with the treatment. Were they able to do that in the hospital?
Right.
Did they connect you with the mental health?
No, because I didn't think it was related to what I had gone through in the past. And, you know, after I left the doctor's office, I went home and I had a couple good nights, and, you know, life goes on. But then one night it would happen, and I'll start talking to myself now. I'll say, Clementine, everything is okay. You're not dying. You'll be just fine. And so after I learned how to cope with it, then I didn't feel like I needed to go and say, I think I'm dying. But if I would have had, you know, if I would have brought it up and said, this is my background, maybe the emergency room doctor would have said, you know what, maybe you should go talk to someone. But looking at me, a lot of people don't think that I went through all that. And, you know, I'm cheerful, I'm very positive, and it's hard to, and that's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because it's hard to get help when you're that person that's cheering everyone up.
Yeah. But we all have ups and downs. And the other thing is also, I think the lesson is, if you go to the doctor and there's nothing medically wrong with you, then please pick up the phone yourself and call a mental health person and say, you know what, there's something going on with me. It's not medical. So I don't know what it is. Can I come in and talk to you? And then that's when you'll have a conversation like me and you had.
Right.
Well, have you ever felt any flashbacks where you have dreams, or just being afraid, or just being depressed? Some days you just don't want to get up. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to do anything. And you just feel defeated. Like,
you feel like a zombie. That was a huge feeling.
Why am I feeling this way? That's it. It's depression. And then we can help you connect it together. What are the treatments? Part of it is that psychotherapy, which is talking to you through it and helping you come up with those questions. I'm okay. And what can I do in order to be able to deal and cope with this? We call that cognitive behavioral treatment, where we teach you how to think differently and work with that. But there's also medication. That some people with severe can take.
And I have to say, I mean, I was depressed shortly after my daughter died. But when I was having the panic attacks, even when I was in Kenya, I didn't feel like I was depressed, you know, because it was something that was happening mostly at night. But during the day, I'll be fine, you know. So I don't know, a lot of people might be confused by, I'm not feeling sad or anything, but I'm having these panic attacks. So am I depressed, or do I have anxiety? Because a lot of us don't even know
the good
what the
thing
difference
about
is.
it is you don't have to figure that out at all. That's why we went to school for years and years and years to figure that out for you. You just come in, you sit down in a chair, and you cross your legs, or you sit there and lay on the couch, and then say, okay, this is how I'm feeling. You figure it out. That's what we do. We help you figure it out.
Okay.
Because otherwise it will be even more depressing for you to figure it out. Am I anxiety? Is it anxiety? Is it depression?
Right, like which one
Nope,
am I?
Don't worry about it.
You know?
Yeah, that's
because
what
in
we
my
do.
mind, and I feel like in a lot of people's minds, they
Yes.
feel like when you're depressed, you're sad.
Yeah.
But I wasn't feeling sad. I was just having these panic attacks and sweaty palms and, you know, frightened at night. But I wasn't necessarily a sad person.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's what we help you figure it out. And once we figure it out, then we'll determine whether it's very severe to the point that, you know, it's not allowing you to do what you can do on a daily basis. Then we refer you for medications, but we continue to talk to you. How often we talk to you will determine the severity. But all that good stuff there, you don't have to worry about it. But you know what? Time is not on our side. It's been great. I told you. Time has not been on our side. So we learned a lot about PTSD. We learned a lot about your experience in the Rwandan genocide. And you know what? If people want you to come and speak, you know, at school assemblies and their churches, how can they get in touch with you?
Great. So I do have a website. My website is www.clementinebihiga.com. If you want to reach me by email, my email address is info@clementinebihiga.com. Or if you just Google my name, Clementine Bihiga, you'll be able to find my contact information.
Thank you so much. It's actually right at the bottom of the screen. You'll see the website, and you also get to see the email. So be sure to get her to your school, your church, your women's conference, teen conferences, any conferences that you need a speaker. You can hire Clementine Bihiga, and the contact information is at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for coming here today,
Thank you.
we can't wait to hear about this book.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the Dr. Stem Show.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Stem Show. Have a terrific week.